The autumn wind of 1902 carried the scent of pine and memory across the Colorado highlands. Old Eli Blackwood sat motionless on the wooden porch of his cabin, weathered hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee gone cold. At 68 years, his frame remained solid as the mountains themselves, though white hair and beard now framed a face carved deep by sun and sorrow. His eyes, still sharp as a hawk's, gazed toward the distant peaks of the Rockies, where his story had begun 3 decades before. Beside him, young Thomas Blackwood shifted in his chair, 22 years old and restless with the energy of a generation that had never known true wilderness. The young man's fingers traced the stock of an old Sharps rifle mounted above the doorway, its wood dark with age and use. "Grandfather, you've never told me the whole story, about this rifle, about grandmother, about how a white mountain man came to marry an Apache warrior woman." Old Eli's lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. He set down the cup and looked at his grandson, seeing in those young eyes the same hunger for truth that had driven him so long ago. "You want to know? Then settle in, boy. This isn't some dime novel tale. This is blood and bone and choices that cost more than gold." Thomas leaned forward, and old Eli's gaze drifted back across the years, his voice dropping into the cadence of memory. "It was the spring of 1870. I was 36 years old, and I'd been dead inside for 3 years. The world shifted, colors bleeding into sepia tones of remembrance, and the story began. Spring 1870. The Rocky Mountains stood eternal and indifferent to the man who had fled into their embrace. Elijah Blackwood lived 40 miles from the nearest settlement, in a cabin he'd built with his own calloused hands. 200 trees had fallen to raise those walls. Every log bore the mark of his axe, every joint the precision of a man who had nothing left but craftsmanship and silence. The cabin measured 20 feet by 16, chinked with moss and clay, roofed with split shingles and tanned hides. Inside hung the tools of survival: a double-bladed axe, a handsaw with teeth he sharpened weakly, a small anvil and hammer for basic smithing. His Sharps Model 1863 rifle, .52 caliber, stood ready by the door, effective range 500 yards. He knew because he'd measured it against his conscience every day for 3 years. Outside, 15 steel traps lay scattered along the creek beds for beaver. 20 snares waited in the brush for rabbits. 5 massive bear traps, each weighing 30 pounds, guarded the approaches to his territory. His Appaloosa gelding, Smoke, 7 years old and steady as stone, grazed in a small corral built from lodgepole pine. Eli stood 6'1" in his elk-hide boots, 195 pounds of muscle and scars. His beard, rust red mixed with premature gray, hung thick to his chest. Hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather. A 3-inch scar ran from his right cheekbone to his jaw, a gift from Gettysburg that throbbed when storms approached. He wore buckskin he'd tanned himself, trousers reinforced with canvas at the knees, and a shirt that had once been blue before sun and smoke turned it the color of dust. On his hip rode a bowie knife with a 12-inch blade. In a holster across his chest, a Colt Navy .36 revolver. These were not decorations. They were extensions of a man who had learned that the world respected only strength and steel. He had not spoken to another human being in 42 days. That morning broke clear and cold, frost glittering on pine needles like scattered diamonds. Eli rose before dawn, as always, built a fire with practiced efficiency, and ate a breakfast of cornmeal mush and dried venison. No coffee. He'd run out 3 weeks prior and wouldn't make the trek to town until autumn. Solitude had become more precious than comfort. By the time the sun cleared the eastern peaks, he was 2 miles from the cabin, checking his trap line along Copper Creek. The work was methodical, almost meditative. Walk 20 paces, check trap, reset if empty, skin and prepare if full, move on. The rhythm allowed his mind to drift into the blessed numbness that had become his only peace. The first 7 traps yielded nothing. The 8th held a beaver, fat and prime. Good pelt, worth maybe $4 when he finally took his furs to market. He worked quickly with the skinning knife, respectful of the animal even as he harvested it. Waste nothing, honor the kill. These were rules he'd learned from necessity and kept from something deeper. He was resetting the trap when Smoke's ears pricked forward. The horse stood 30 yards away, hobbled but alert, staring toward a cluster of boulders near the canyon wall. Eli froze. In 3 years of solitude, he'd learned to trust the animal's instincts more than his own. No bird called. The wind died. The kind of silence that preceded either miracle or violence. Eli's hand found the colt before his mind registered the decision. He moved low and slow, using the terrain, approaching from an angle that kept him out of direct line from the rocks. Every sense sharpened, every muscle coiled. Then he heard it, a sound so out of place in this wilderness that his mind rejected it for 3 full seconds. A child crying. Not the yowl of a mountain lion kit, not the mewling of a bear cub. A human child, young, exhausted, trying to be quiet, and failing. Eli rounded the boulder with the colt raised and found her. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Dark skin burned darker by sun and wind. Black hair, matted with dust and blood, hung in 2 braids that had half come undone. She wore what had once been a buckskin dress, now torn and filthy, decorated with fading blue and red beadwork in patterns Eli recognized. Apache. Her feet were bare and bleeding. Her left leg, swollen above the ankle, bore 2 puncture marks, still weeping fluid. Snakebite. Coral snake, by the look of it. Neurotoxic venom. 6 hours, maybe less, before paralysis and death. The girl's eyes locked on his. Dark brown, nearly black, wide with terror and pain. But there was something else in that gaze. Pride. Defiance. She was dying, and she knew it, but she wouldn't beg, wouldn't cry out for mercy from a white man with a gun. Instead, her small hand moved to her side and produced a bone-handled knife, no longer than his palm. She held it toward him with a trembling arm. "Stay back, white ghost." The words came in English, heavily accented but clear. Someone had taught her. Someone who was no longer here to protect her. Eli holstered the Colt slowly, showing his empty hands. He'd killed men in war. He'd killed animals for survival. But he would not add a child to that tally, especially one already marked by death. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you're going to die if I don't help. That's a coral snake bite. You understand?" She didn't lower the knife, but her hand shook harder. The venom was spreading. He could see it in the way her breathing had gone shallow, the slight droop of her left eyelid. "Why you help? White man kill Apache." The truth of it hit him like a fist. Yes, white men killed Apache. He'd worn the blue uniform. He'd followed orders. He'd been part of the machine that ground these people into dust. "Some do, but I won't. Not today. Not you." He knelt slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. From his belt he pulled a leather canteen and set it on the ground between them. "Water first. Then I need to treat that bite, or the poison will stop your heart." She stared at the canteen for 10 long seconds. Pride warred with survival. Finally, survival won. She lowered the knife slightly and reached for the water with her free hand. The moment her fingers touched the canteen, her strength gave out. She collapsed forward, the knife clattering on stone. Eli moved fast, catching her before her head struck rock. Her skin burned with fever. The leg had swollen to twice its normal size, skin tight and shining. No time for gentleness, no time for permission. He laid her flat on a patch of grass, pulled out his Bowie knife, and held the blade in the flames of a quick fire built from pine needles and dry grass. The girl's eyes fluttered open, saw the knife, and panic flared. "I have to cut the wound open and draw the poison. This will hurt, but you're brave. I can see that." She whimpered, but didn't pull away, didn't scream. Just bit down on her lower lip until blood showed. Eli made 2 quick incisions in an X pattern over the bite marks. Blood and yellowish fluid welled up. He put his mouth to the wound and sucked hard, spitting the mixture aside, repeating the process 5 times until the flow ran mostly clear and red. Then he poured whiskey from his flask over the cuts, wrapped the leg tight with a strip cut from his own shirt, and tied it off above the knee to slow the venom's spread. "What's your name?" he asked as he worked. She managed 1 word before unconsciousness claimed her. "Ayanna." It meant eternal blossom in the Apache tongue. He knew because he'd learned a handful of their words during the war. "Know your enemy," the sergeant had said. But this child was no enemy. She was just a little girl, dying alone in the wilderness. He lifted her carefully, surprised by how light she was, how fragile. Placed her across Smoke's saddle and swung up behind her, cradling her against his chest. The ride back to the cabin took 3 hours. She burned with fever the entire way, sometimes crying out words in Apache he couldn't understand, sometimes going silent and still in a way that terrified him more than her struggles. When he finally laid her on his own bed in the cabin, the sun hung low and red in the western sky. He stoked the fire hot, boiled water, cleaned the wound again with soap he made from ash and animal fat, wrapped her in his only blanket, dripped water between her cracked lips, and then there was nothing to do but wait. Night fell. Eli sat in the rough wooden chair beside the bed, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, listening to her labored breathing. His mind wandered paths he'd tried to wall off for 3 years. His son Nathaniel had been 9 years old, brown hair like his mother, quick smile, clever hands. He'd wanted to learn woodworking, had begged his father to teach him before Eli marched off to war. "When I get back," Eli had promised, "when I get back, we'll build you a whole workshop." But Eli had come back to Graves. Disease had swept through their Pennsylvania town in 1866, while he was away saving the Union. His wife Mary, his boy, both taken by fever, while he fought strangers' battles 300 miles away. He'd tried to stay, tried to rebuild, but everywhere he looked, he saw ghosts. The house was full of them. The town was full of them. Even his own reflection had become a ghost, a hollow thing in the shape of a man who'd failed the only mission that mattered. So he'd fled, west to the territories, up into the mountains where silence and solitude might finally let him forget. But you can't outrun ghosts. They follow you into the wilderness. They whisper in the wind. They stare at you from the shadows. Now one had taken the form of a dying Apache girl, who looked at him with courage that reminded him of everything he'd lost. Ayana's fever broke 3 hours before dawn. Her breathing eased. The swelling in her leg began to subside. When the first gray light crept through the cabin's single window, she opened her eyes and found Eli still sitting there, exhausted and unshaven, watching over her like a guardian angel carved from weathered oak. She studied him for a long moment, those dark eyes taking in every detail. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You good man? Or like them?" Eli had no answer. He'd been asking himself the same question for 3 years. Was he good? Or was he just another killer who'd traded one kind of death for another? "I don't know anymore, but I'm trying to be better than I was." She seemed to accept this. Her eyes closed again, but this time in sleep rather than unconsciousness. Real sleep. Healing sleep. Over the following days, something unexpected happened in that isolated cabin. Ayana healed, and so did something in Eli that he'd thought broken beyond repair. She taught him Apache words while he changed her bandages. Shima meant mother. Shie meant son. Ne meant home. He taught her better English, showed her how to strike flint and steel at the correct 45-degree angle to make fire, how to read deer tracks by the spacing of the hoofprints, how to find water by watching where birds flew at dawn. She learned like someone who understood that knowledge meant survival. On the 4th evening, she told him about the attack. Raiders had come at night. Fire. Screaming. Her mother fighting like a demon, killing 2 men with a knife before shouting at Ayana to run. The girl had run into the darkness, gotten lost in the desert, wandered for days until the snake found her. "Mother, Nya'at, I think she alive. I feel her here." Ayana pressed a small fist to her chest. "But I lost. I lost long time." The words hung in the air. This child had family. Somewhere out there, a mother might be searching, grieving, hoping. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ayana began to hum. The tune was haunting, minor key, old as the mountains. Then she sang, soft words in Apache that Eli didn't understand but felt in his chest. Mother song. She sing when I scared. It say mountain keep you safe. Stars watch over you. You never alone. Something broke open in Eli's chest. Before he could stop himself, he began to sing back. An old song from Pennsylvania. A lullaby Mary had sung to Nathaniel. His voice cracked. Ayana scooted closer and took his hand. "You sad like Nyat. She sad when father die. You lose someone?" "I had a son, Nathaniel. He was 9. He died while I was away." "I sorry, but you saved me. That good. Nathaniel would be proud." For the first time in 3 years, Elijah Blackwood cried. Ayana held his hand through all of it, this tiny warrior who had stared down death and survived. "You good father, I know. I feel it." On the 21st day, everything changed. A rider appeared on the ridge. Caleb Thornton, fur trader, 55 years old, with gray-streaked hair and the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades on the frontier. He rode a Mustang and carried a Winchester Model 1866. "Blackwood, heard you were still alive." "Not yet. Light down." Caleb followed Eli toward the cabin. Then he stopped dead, staring at Ayana. "Where'd you find her?" 3 weeks back, snake bite, nearly dead. She's Apache, but I don't know her people." Caleb moved closer, studying the girl's face. He spoke to her in Apache. She answered, and Caleb's breath caught. "This child looks exactly like Nalnish, Red Eagle woman, most beautiful and most dangerous Apache warrior I ever met." Who is she? Legendary among the Mescalero, a hunter who could track and kill mountain lions alone, a fighter who once took down 3 raiders single-handed. After her husband was killed by cavalry at Fort Bowie 5 years back, she became harder, colder. 3 years ago, her village was attacked. Mexican raiders burned everything. We heard she and her daughter died in the fires. "Nyat, alive!" Ayana interrupted, scrambling to her feet. "Mother, alive! She fight men, tell me run. I run, but I get lost. She looking for me. I know she is." Caleb's expression softened, then hardened as he turned to Eli. "If Naalnish lives and thinks her daughter is dead, she'll be hunting. And Blackwood, that woman has killed more white men than cholera. If you ride into Apache territory with her daughter, she'll either thank you or gut you. I honestly don't know which." Eli felt certainty settle in his gut. "I have to take her back." "To Apache territory? You know what they'll do to a white man, especially one wearing buckskins that look like modified cavalry issue?" "Doesn't matter. The girl deserves to be with her mother." "Even if it gets you killed?" "Even then." Caleb sighed and pulled out charcoal. On a scrap of hide, he sketched a crude map. Mescalero Range, about 120 miles south, rough country. You'll cross 3 rivers, pass through Comanche territory, then enter Apache land. Canyon country. Easy to get lost. Easier to get dead. He explained the route in detail. Water sources, dangerous passes, places to avoid. One more thing. The Army's pushing hard to force tribes onto reservations. General Howard's talking about a summer campaign. You could get caught between Apache warriors and cavalry patrols. Neither side will care about your intentions. After Caleb left, Ayana tugged Eli's sleeve. "You scared?" He looked down at this child who had survived so much. "Terrified. But we're going anyway." She smiled. "I knew you come with me. You good man, Eli. You just forget for a little while. Now you remember." 2 days later, they rode south into territory that wanted them dead. The journey took 4 days through pine forests and ice-cold streams. Eli taught Ayana more tracking. She taught him Apache prayers. They settled into an easy rhythm, almost like father and daughter, though neither spoke the words aloud. On the 4th morning, they descended into rolling hills of red rock. Ayana began recognizing landmarks. "That rock! Mother, take me there! We climb together!" They were close now, close to Apache territory, close to judgment. That evening, by their fire, Ayana asked the question she'd been holding. "When we find Nyat, you leave?" "That's up to your mother and your people. I'm a white man in Apache land. They might not want me to stay." "But I want you to stay. You my father now. Father number 2. The words struck him like a blow. Father. He'd failed that role once so completely. "Ayana, your mother is alive. You'll have real family again, not just some broken old mountain man." She shook her head fiercely. "You not broken. You save me. You teach me. You make me feel safe. That what father do." "That's what you do." Eli pulled her close. She cried against his chest, this child who'd faced death without tears, now crying at the thought of losing him. "I'll stay as long as I can. But I've done things in the war. Bad things. Things your people would hate me for if they knew." "What things?" He couldn't tell her about Fort Bowie, about standing guard while others killed Apache families, about following orders because orders were easier than conscience. "Things I can't take back. Things I'm trying to make up for." She looked at him with those two old eyes. "Then you save me. That make up for some. Maybe you save more people, then make up for more. You keep trying, you get there." Such simple grace. He held her until she fell asleep, more precious than anything he'd held since his son. The next morning, everything exploded. They traveled 10 miles through canyon country when Smoke stopped, ears forward. Then they appeared. 6 Apache warriors materialized from the rocks like ghosts, painted for war, armed with bows and rifles. They spread in a circle, blocking any escape. Eli's heart hammered, but he moved slowly. Both hands came up, empty and peaceful. "Shinanish du ya'ate." I come in peace. The lead warrior was tall for Apache, maybe 5'10", with a diagonal scar across his bare chest. His eyes were black as obsidian. War paint made him look like death itself. He urged his pony forward, studying Eli with contempt. Then his eyes shifted to Ayanna, and his expression transformed. Shock, disbelief, wonder. He barked a question in Apache. Ayanna answered, words tumbling over each other. The warrior's eyes widened. He leaped from his horse and rushed forward, stopping just short of touching the child, as if she might disappear. "Ayanna? Red Eagle's daughter? We thought you were dead. We mourned you." "Dakota." Ayanna recognized him, her face lighting with joy. She launched into rapid Apache, gesturing at Eli, at her leg, at the mountains behind them. Dakota listened, but never took his eyes off Eli. When Ayanna finished, he circled Smoke slowly, taking in every detail. "Why does a white man bring back a child we thought dead? What do you want? Gold? Reward? Information to sell to the army?" "Nothing. I found her dying of snakebite 3 weeks ago. I healed her. When I learned she had family, I brought her home. That's all." "That is never all with white men. You're a spy, or you want something, or you plan to lead soldiers to destroy us." Ayanna spoke up then, fierce and protective. More Apache, rapid and emphatic. Dakota's expression flickered. Doubt warred with suspicion. He looked at the girl, seeing truth in her eyes. Then at Eli, seeing something unexpected. No lies, no calculation, just a tired man trying to do one good thing. Finally, Dakota made his decision. He spoke to his warriors. 2 moved in, one taking Smoke's reins, the other searching Eli for weapons. "You will come with us. Keep your hands visible. If you reach for a weapon, you die. If this is a trap, you die. If our council or Nalnish decides you are a threat, you die. Understand?" "I understand." The warrior searching him was thorough. He found the Colt, the Bowie knife, a smaller blade in Eli's boot, a derringer in a hidden pocket. All were confiscated. The Sharps was unloaded, ammunition removed. The group formed up, 3 warriors ahead, 3 behind, Eli and Ayanna in the middle. They moved deeper into canyon country at a punishing pace. Red rock walls rose higher. Side canyons branched in a maze Eli could never navigate alone. They were taking him somewhere he could never leave without permission. Somewhere he would be completely at their mercy. Ayanna leaned back against him, her small hand finding his. "Don't be scared. When Nyat come, she will understand. She will see you good, I promise." Eli wished he shared her confidence. He'd seen what Apache did to captured enemies, had helped bury what was left of them. and now he rode unarmed into their heartland, trusting the word of a child and hoping for mercy from a woman who had every reason to hate him. Somewhere ahead, Nalnish waited, Red Eagle woman, warrior and mother, the woman who tracked mountain lions, the woman who'd killed 3 raiders alone, the most dangerous woman the trader had ever seen, and she thought her daughter was dead. Eli straightened his spine. Whatever came, he would not run. Not from the chance to return a daughter to her mother. Not from the first thing that had felt like redemption since he'd stood beside 2 graves and realized he had nothing left to live for. The warriors led him deeper into the maze, and with every step, the weight of his past pressed heavier. Fort Bowie, the screams, the blood, the orders he'd followed because following orders was easier than conscience. But that weight came with something new. Hope. For the first time in 3 years, Elijah Blackwood had something worth living for beyond survival. A purpose. A mission. A chance to balance accounts that could never be balanced but demanded the attempt. The canyon walls closed in, and he rode toward whatever judgment awaited, ready to accept it with the same courage this child had shown when she'd held a knife with trembling hands and refused to beg for mercy. The Apache village appeared like a mirage carved into the living rock. 45 souls lived in this hidden canyon, their wickiups clustered along a spring-fed creek that sang over smooth stones. Women looked up from their work, hands freezing mid-motion. Children stopped their games. Elders emerged from shadowed doorways. All eyes turned to the impossible sight riding into their sanctuary. A white man, armed warriors surrounding him, and in front of him, alive and whole, the child they had mourned for 2 years. The whispers started like wind through grass. Ayanna, Red Eagle's daughter, returned from the dead, brought by a white ghost who looked like every soldier who had ever burned their homes and murdered their families. Dakota dismounted and spoke rapid commands. Warriors formed a tighter circle around Eli. An old woman rushed forward, tears streaming down weathered cheeks, reaching for Ayanna with trembling hands. The girl slid from the saddle and was immediately engulfed in embraces, passed from person to person like something sacred and fragile that might shatter if held too tightly. Through it all, Eli sat motionless on smoke, hands visible, making no move that could be construed as threat. His eyes took in everything: the defensive position of the village, the scarcity of warriors, the fear barely hidden beneath the joy of reunion. These were people who had learned that happiness was temporary and danger eternal. An ancient man emerged from the largest wickiup, moving with the careful dignity of age and authority. Maka, Gray Bear. The tradesman had spoken of him. 67 years old, leader of what remained of his people after disease and soldiers and broken treaties had whittled them down to this desperate remnant hiding in canyons like animals. The old man's face was a landscape of deep creases and hard-won wisdom. His hair, white as winter clouds, hung long and unbound. He wore simple buckskin, no ornamentation, but commanded respect through presence alone. When he raised one hand, silence fell like a curtain dropping. He spoke to Ayanna in Apache, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. The girl answered, gesturing at Eli, her words tumbling over themselves in their urgency. Maka listened without interruption, his dark eyes shifting occasionally to study the white man who sat there waiting for judgment. When Ayanna finished, Maka approached Smoke slowly. He stopped 3 feet away and spoke in English that carried only the faintest accent, learned from missionaries decades ago, when he still believed white men might keep their word. "You are Elijah Stone. You found this child dying. You healed her. You brought her home. This is what she tells me. It's the truth. White men and truth are strangers to each other in my experience. But this child does not lie. So I will ask you directly, what do you want from us?" "Nothing. I want nothing." "Then you are the first white man in 67 years to want nothing from my people. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe." Eli met the old man's gaze without flinching. "I don't expect you to believe me. I expect you to watch me. Judge me by what I do, not what I say." Something flickered in Maka's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect for honesty, even when honesty offered no advantage. "You will be kept under guard. You will sleep in a separate wickiup with warriors watching. If you make any move toward weapons, toward escape, toward anything that threatens my people, you will be killed. These are not negotiations. These are facts. Do you accept them?" "I accept them." Maka nodded once. He turned to issue orders, but an old woman interrupted, speaking urgent Apache while pointing at Eli. Her weathered face carried fear and warning in equal measure. Maka listened, then looked back at Eli. "The Luye reminds me that you may be bait, that soldiers may follow you here, that this may be how they finally destroy us. No one followed me. I made sure of it." "You made sure." The old man's voice carried bitter amusement. "And yet 3 villages said the same thing before cavalry rode through their camps at dawn, killing everyone who could not run fast enough. Children, elders, women heavy with child. All made sure. All dead." The words hit like stones. Eli had no defense because there was no defense. What Maka described had happened, was still happening, would continue happening until there were no Apache left to hunt. "I swear on my son's grave that no one followed me. I would die before I led anyone to this place." Maka studied him for a long moment. "Perhaps you would. We will see if that oath is tested. Take him." 2 warriors gripped Eli's arms and pulled him from the saddle. They were not gentle, but neither were they unnecessarily brutal. Professional, efficient. Men who had done this before and understood that cruelty was sometimes necessary, but never to be enjoyed. They led him to a small wickiup at the edge of the village, far from the others, easy to watch. Inside was a blanket, nothing more. One warrior stationed himself at the entrance. Another circled the structure, checking for weaknesses, for escape routes, finding none, because there were none to find. Eli sat on the blanket and waited. Time passed in strange, elastic ways when you had no control over your fate. He heard the sounds of the village resuming life around him. Children's laughter, tentative at first, then growing bolder. Women's voices calling to each other. The ring of stone on stone as someone worked hides or sharpened tools. Normal sounds, human sounds. Sounds that reminded him these people he'd been taught to see as enemies were just families trying to survive in a world that wanted them extinct. As the sun climbed toward noon, Ayana appeared at the entrance. The guard started to turn her away, but she spoke sharp Apache and pushed past him with the authority of a child who knew she was beloved and protected. "Eli." She knelt beside him, her small face serious. "Nya'at coming. She was hunting, far away. Takota send runner yesterday when we get close. She coming fast. She be here before sun go down." "How is she?" Eli asked quietly. "Your mother. How has she been since she lost you?" Ayana's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Lilu ye say nia at become stone." After fire, after she think I dead, she stopped talking much, stopped smiling. Only hunt and fight. Kill 3 men who try to hurt village. Everyone's scared of her now. Scared and sad because inside, she dead like I was dead. But you're alive. That changes everything. Maybe. Or maybe she's so broken she can't come back. Or maybe, the girl's voice dropped to a whisper, maybe she see you, white man, and only see the men who kill father. Only see soldier. Only see enemy. Then that's what she sees. But it doesn't change what I did. I still brought you home. Ayana hugged him fiercely. You promise you stay? You promise you not run, even if she angry? I promise. The girl left, and Eli was alone again with his thoughts and the weight of approaching judgment. The sun crawled across the sky like something wounded. Shadows lengthened. The village grew quieter as anticipation built like pressure before a storm. Even the children stopped playing, sensing something momentous approaching. Then, as the sun touched the western canyon rim, painting everything gold and crimson, a shout went up. "Nalnish! Red Eagle Woman returns!" Eli heard it before he saw it. The sound of hoofbeats. One horse, ridden hard. Then she appeared at the canyon mouth, and time seemed to slow. She rode a paint mare that looked half wild, both horse and rider moving as one entity. She was tall for an Apache woman, perhaps 5'8", sitting straight in a saddle made from leather and wood. Her buckskin dress, decorated with blue and red beadwork, fit her like armor. Black hair hung in a single thick braid down her back, reaching past her waist. Even from a distance, Eli could see the scar on her left cheek, a pale line that only emphasized the fierce beauty of her face. She carried a bow and quiver. A knife rode at her hip. Behind her saddle, a deer was tied, proof of a successful hunt. But none of that registered once she saw the crowd gathered in the center of the village. Nalnish dismounted while the horse was still moving, hitting the ground at a run. The deer fell forgotten. The bow clattered on stone. She ran with the desperate speed of someone who had dreamed this moment so many times that reality seemed impossible. "Ayana!" The name tore from her throat like something physical. The girl broke from the crowd and ran to meet her mother. They collided in the center of the village, and Nalnish dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter against her chest, with a violence born of 2 years of grief finally breaking open. She made sounds that were not quite words, not quite sobs, something primal and wounded and healing all at once. Her hands moved over Ayana's face, her arms, her legs, as if checking that the child was real and whole and not another cruel dream sent to torture her. "Shie, Shie, Shie." My daughter, my daughter, my daughter. The entire village watched in silence. Even the hardest warriors turned away, unable to witness such raw emotion without feeling their own losses, their own griefs, their own children buried or taken or lost to the grinding machinery of conquest and survival. Finally, after an eternity compressed into minutes, Nalnish pulled back enough to look at her daughter's face. How are you alive? I searched for months. I found nothing. No trail, no sign, nothing. White man find me, Nyaat. In mountains. Snake bite me. I was dying. He save me. He bring me home. Nalnish's expression changed in an instant. The grief and joy drained away, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. White man? Her voice had gone flat, dead. The voice of someone deciding whether to kill quickly or slowly. Where? Maka stepped forward, his old voice carrying clearly. We have him, Nalnish. He is guarded. He came willingly, knowing what we might do to him. The child speaks truth. He saved her life and brought her home. But he is white, and he wears clothes that look like cavalry. The decision of what to do with him is partly yours. Naalnish stood slowly. She released Ayana to an aunt's care and walked toward the wickiup where Eli waited. The crowd parted before her like water before stone. She moved with the controlled grace of a hunter, every step deliberate, every muscle ready. The scar on her face stood out pale against skin flushed with emotion and exertion. She stopped at the entrance to Eli's prison. The guard stepped aside without being asked, and then she was there, silhouetted against the dying light, looking down at the man who had saved her daughter. Their eyes met. Eli saw a woman who had survived horrors he could only imagine, who had lost everything and kept fighting because fighting was all she had left, who had turned grief into a weapon sharp enough to cut through 3 armed men. Naalnish saw a white man, a mountain man who looked like every scout who had ever led soldiers to burning villages, who wore buckskin that might have been stolen from Apache dead, who sat there calm and unafraid in a way that either spoke of immense courage or immense stupidity. You brought my daughter home. Her English was excellent, learned from missionaries and traders, sharpened by years of negotiating for her people's survival. I did. Why? Because she deserved to be with her mother. That is not why white men do things. White men want gold, want land, want glory, want to be thanked and praised and rewarded. What do you want? Eli met her eyes without flinching. I want nothing. I wanted to do one good thing, that's all. One good thing. She laughed, and it was the saddest sound Eli had ever heard. To balance how many bad things? How many villages burned? How many families destroyed? How many children like mine left to die in the desert? More than I can ever balance. But I'm trying. Nalnish studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without another word, leaving Eli in darkness as the sun finally vanished and night claimed the canyon. He sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the village settling for night, listening to the quiet sobs of a mother who had gotten her daughter back but didn't know if she could trust the man who had returned her, listening to his own heartbeat and wondering if he would live to see another sunrise. Outside, under the vast canopy of stars, Maka and Nalnish spoke in low voices, making decisions, weighing options, judging a man's life based on imperfect information and a history soaked in blood on both sides. Ayana sat between them, her small voice rising occasionally in defense of the man who had saved her, the man who had cried when she called him father, the man who had ridden willingly into danger to bring her home. And somewhere in that conversation, in that weighing of souls and intentions, a decision was made that would change all their lives forever. Dawn broke cold and clear over the hidden canyon. Eli had not slept. He'd sat through the night listening to voices rise and fall in debate, unable to understand the Apache words but recognizing the cadence of judgment being passed. Now, as pale light crept across the canyon floor, footsteps approached his wickiup, Maka entered, his ancient face unreadable in the half-light. "The council has decided. You may stay for 7 days. During this time, you will help the village, work alongside us. Let us see who you truly are. After 7 days, if Nalnish agrees, you will be free to leave unharmed. If she does not agree, you will leave anyway, but perhaps not alive. This is more mercy than we have received from your kind." Eli stood slowly, every muscle stiff from the night's vigil. "I accept these terms, and I thank you for them." "Do not thank me yet. Nalnish is not convinced. She sees in you every soldier who has killed our people. Prove her wrong, if you can." They released him into the village as the sun climbed higher. Warriors watched his every move, with hands never far from weapons. Women pulled children close when he passed. But the work needed doing, regardless of who did it, and work was the language Eli spoke most fluently. He chopped wood with an axe they grudgingly provided, splitting logs with the practiced efficiency of a man who had built his life from raw timber. The pile grew quickly. An old woman who'd been watching with suspicion gestured for him to carry the wood to her wickiup. He did so without question, stacking it neatly beside her fire pit. She studied him for a long moment, then spoke in halting English. "You work like man who knows hardship." "I know hardship." "Good. Soft men break. Hard times need hard men." By midday he'd drawn water from the creek, repaired a torn wickiup covering, and helped dig a new fire pit. His hands remembered these tasks from his years alone in the mountains. The Apache watched, and slowly, incrementally, their suspicion began to mix with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the recognition that survival required accepting help from unexpected sources. Nalnish appeared in the early afternoon. She'd been avoiding him, he realized, staying away while grief and joy and confusion warred inside her. Now she stood 20 feet away, bow in hand, watching him work. Eli continued repairing a broken trap mechanism, his fingers working the steel with practiced skill. He could feel her eyes on him, but didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her presence. Let her observe without the pressure of interaction. After 10 minutes, she spoke. "Ayana says you taught her to make fire, to track deer, to read weather in the clouds." "I taught her what I know." "Why? She was nothing to you. A burden, a danger." Eli set down the trap and finally met her gaze. In daylight, Nalnish was even more striking than he'd realized. The scar on her cheek didn't diminish her beauty, but rather emphasized it, the way a crack in stone reveals the layers beneath. Her eyes held the kind of strength that comes from being broken and choosing to rebuild. She reminded me of my son, the courage in her, the way she refused to give up even when dying. I couldn't save my boy, but I could save her. Something shifted in Nalnish's expression. The hardness didn't disappear, but it cracked slightly, letting something human show through. "How did your son die?" "Fever. While I was away at war. I came home to his grave." "Then you understand what it means to lose a child." "I understand." Nalnish was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently checking the tension of her bowstring. An automatic gesture born of years relying on that weapon for survival. "My husband died at Fort Bowie. Cavalry attacked at dawn. He fought to give others time to escape. They shot him 6 times. He died in my arms while our village burned." The name hit Eli like a physical blow. Fort Bowie. He'd been there. He'd been part of that garrison. Not during the attack Nalnish described, but close enough. He'd stood guard while other villages burned. Other families were destroyed. He'd told himself he was just following orders, that he wasn't responsible for the big picture, only for doing his duty. But standing here now, looking at the living consequence of those policies, those orders, those choices, the excuses felt hollow and obscene. I was at Fort Bowie, not during that attack, but I was there. I was part of the machine that killed your husband, that burned your village. I can't undo it. I can't bring him back. All I can do is try to be better than I was. Nalnish's hand moved to her knife. For 3 heartbeats, Eli thought she would draw it, would end this now, would exact payment for all the deaths and grief and destroyed lives. But her hand stilled, trembled, then fell away. You are honest. That is unexpected. Most white men lie about what they have done. They pretend their hands are clean when they are covered in our blood. My hands aren't clean. They never will be. But I'm trying to do something good with them now. She studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through flesh to the soul beneath. 7 days. Prove yourself. Prove you are different. Or prove me right about your kind. She walked away, leaving Eli to return to his work with hands that shook slightly from the confrontation and the weight of confession. The days passed in a rhythm of labor and watchful coexistence. Eli worked from dawn to dusk, helping wherever help was needed, carrying water, repairing tools, teaching a young warrior how to set snares using techniques he'd learned in the mountains, accepting with grace the suspicious looks and occasional hostility that came his way. Ayanna was his constant shadow, chattering in mixed Apache and English, bridging the gap between her mother's people and the strange white man who had saved her. She showed him how Apache women prepared food, how they tanned hides using techniques that differed from his own. He showed her how to fashion a fishing hook from bone, how to judge the best trees for making arrows. On the 4th evening, Nalnish approached him as he sat alone by a small fire, eating a portion of venison stew the village had grudgingly shared. "Come, we hunt together tomorrow." It wasn't a request. It was a test. They both knew it. Before dawn, they left the village, just the 2 of them, moving through darkness so complete that Eli had to trust Nalnish's guidance. She moved like smoke, her footfalls silent, her breathing controlled. A lifetime of hunting had made her part of the landscape itself. As the sun rose, painting the canyon walls gold and crimson, she finally spoke. "Deer tracks. 4 animals, 2 does, 1 buck, 1 yearling, moving east toward water." Eli studied the ground, seeing what she saw. The spacing of the hoof prints, the depth indicating weight and age, the scatter of disturbed earth showing direction and speed. "The buck is limping, left rear leg. See how the print is shallower on that side?" Nalnish glanced at him, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You know tracking. I spent 3 years alone in the mountains. You learn or you starve." They moved on, following the trail through brush and over stone. The silence between them grew comfortable, the easy quiet of 2 people focused on the same task. When Nalnish raised a hand to stop, Eli froze instantly. She pointed ahead through the scrub. There, in a small clearing, the deer grazed. The buck was indeed limping, favoring his left rear leg, an old injury, probably from a fall on loose rock. It would heal, or it would kill him slowly. Either way, his suffering could end today. Nalnish drew her bow with fluid grace. The arrow flew true, taking the buck through the heart. He dropped without a sound, dead before he hit the ground. They approached together. Nalnish knelt and placed her hand on the animal's neck, speaking quiet Apache words, a prayer of thanks, an acknowledgement of the life taken to sustain other lives. Eli recognized the ritual from his own practices, born of respect rather than religion. "You honor the kill," he said quietly. "All life is sacred. We take only what we need. Use everything. Waste nothing. This is our way." It's a good way. They worked together to field dress the animal, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. Nalnish watched him work, noting his skill with a blade, his respect for the meat, the way he handled organs destined for different uses. "You do this correctly. You were taught well." "I taught myself, made mistakes, learned from them." That is the only way to truly learn. Mistakes paid for with hunger teach lessons that stay with you. As they worked, she began to talk. Slowly at first, then with increasing openness, as if the act of working together, of honoring the kill together, had created a space where words could flow. She told him about her husband, Kale, Sparrowhawk, how he'd taught her to shoot, to track, to fight, how he'd believed their people could find a way to coexist with the whites if they were just given a chance, how he'd died still believing that lie, shot down while protecting others. "After he died, I became hard, cold. I focused only on survival, on protecting what remained of our people. Then I lost Ayana in the raid, and I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I stopped being a person. I became a weapon. Just a weapon." "But you're still a person. You're still a mother. Ayana's alive, and she needs you to be more than a weapon." Nalnish was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling in their work. "And what are you, Elijah Stone? Still a soldier? Still following orders that lead to death?" "No. I'm trying to be something better. I'm trying to be someone my son would have been proud of." "Your son died. Mine lives. Perhaps the spirits trade one life for another, keeping balance. Perhaps. Or perhaps we just do our best in a world that doesn't make sense, and hope it's enough." They carried the deer back to the village together, taking turns with the weight. When they arrived, the village greeted them with approval. A successful hunt meant food for days. Meat could be dried, bones used for tools, hide for clothing. Nothing would be wasted. That night, as the village gathered to share the meat, Maka called for silence. 7 days have passed. Elijah Stone has worked beside us, hunted with us, proven himself useful. The question now is whether he has proven himself trustworthy. Nalnish, he brought your daughter home. He has lived among us without causing harm. What is your judgment?" All eyes turned to the warrior woman. She stood slowly, her tall frame silhouetted against the fire, her face unreadable in the dancing shadows. "When this white man first came, I wanted to kill him. I saw in him every soldier who has destroyed our people, every broken promise, every burned village, every grave I have dug." She paused, and the silence was absolute. "But I watched him. I hunted with him. I saw how he treats my daughter, how he works without complaint, how he honors the kill and respects our ways. He is not like the others. He is broken, as I am broken, but he is trying to rebuild himself into something better." She looked directly at Eli. "You may stay, not as prisoner, not as guest, but as one who works for his place among us. You will learn our ways. You will defend our village if danger comes. You will earn the right to be here, day by day, with your actions. If you fail, you leave. If you betray us, you die. But if you prove yourself, you may find what you are searching for, a home, a family, a reason to be more than what you were. Eli felt something break open in his chest. A weight he'd carried for 3 years suddenly lifted, just slightly, just enough to let him breathe. "I accept, and I swear I will never betray your trust." Maka nodded slowly. "Then it is decided. You are Shyla now. Brother, you are one of us, but you must prove it every day. This is our way." The village erupted in mixed reactions. Some nodded approval, others frowned skeptically. But the decision had been made by those who held authority, and it would stand. Ayana rushed to Eli, wrapping her small arms around him. "You stay! You stay! I told Niat you were good. I told everyone." Over the child's head, Eli's eyes met Nalnish's.
She didn't smile, but something in her expression had softened. The wall between them hadn't disappeared, but a door had opened. Just a crack, just enough. The following days brought an unexpected rhythm. Eli truly became part of the village, no longer watched constantly, no longer held at arm's length. He helped build a new storage structure, taught young warriors advanced tracking techniques, and learned Apache methods for preserving meat that proved superior to his own. And slowly, carefully, he and Nalnish circled each other like two wounded animals, learning that not everything that approaches means harm. She showed him how to move silently through brush that he would have crashed through. He showed her how to read distant weather patterns in cloud formations. They hunted together twice more, and each time the silence between them grew more comfortable, more companionable. One evening, 3 weeks after his arrival, they sat together on a rocky outcrop overlooking the canyon, watching the sun paint the world in impossible colors. "Why did you really come here?" Nalnish asked quietly. "Not just to bring Ayana home. There is something more." Eli considered the question carefully. "I've spent 3 years running from my past, from the war, from the death of my family, from the things I did in uniform. I thought solitude would heal me, but all it did was let me hide. When I found Ayana, when I brought her here, I stopped hiding. I started facing what I'd done, started trying to make it right. Can it be made right? Can any of it be made right? No, but I can try. Every day, I can try to be better than I was, to help instead of harm, to build instead of destroy." Nalnish was quiet for a long moment. "After Kale died, I thought I could never trust a man again, especially a white man. But you confuse me, Elijah Stone. You are honest about your failures. You work hard. You are kind to my daughter. You make me remember that not all men are enemies." "I make you remember?" She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in those strong features. "I make myself forget how to be anything but a warrior, how to laugh, how to hope, how to trust. But watching you with Ayana, seeing how you care for her, it reminds me that life is more than just surviving. It is also about living." Then we both remember together. The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Then Nalnish stood, breaking the spell. "Come, we should return before Ayana worries." But as they walked back to the village, their hands brushed once, twice, and neither pulled away. The peace, however temporary, shattered 2 days later. Eli was working with Dakota, teaching the warrior how to repair a particularly complex trap mechanism, when scouts came racing into the village. Their faces carried the kind of fear that turns men's blood cold. "Cavalry, 3 miles out, maybe 40 soldiers. They are coming this way." The village erupted into controlled chaos. Women grabbed children. Warriors seized weapons. Maka shouted orders, his old voice carrying authority that cut through panic. Nalnish appeared beside Eli, bow in hand, her face hard as stone. "Did you lead them here? Was this the plan all along?" "No, I swear I didn't. I made sure I wasn't followed." "Then how? How did they find us?" "I don't know, but I'll help defend the village. Give me a weapon." She hesitated, suspicion warring with necessity. Finally, she thrust a rifle into his hands. An old Spencer repeater, probably taken from a dead soldier. "If you betray us, I will kill you myself." Slowly. "Understood." Takota organized the defense. 10 warriors, Eli and Nalnish. Everyone else would evacuate through a hidden trail that led deeper into the canyon system. The defenders would buy time with their lives, if necessary. They took positions among the rocks at the canyon entrance, using natural cover to create overlapping fields of fire. Eli found himself beside Nalnish, their shoulders almost touching in the narrow space between boulders. "Can you shoot?" she asked. "Yes." "Can you kill?" "I've killed before. I don't want to again. But I will, to protect your people." She looked at him, searching his face for lies, finding none. "Then we fight together." The cavalry appeared as the sun reached its zenith, 40 soldiers in blue uniforms, led by a captain on a bay horse. They rode with the confidence of men who outnumbered their quarry, 4-1. The captain raised his hand, halting the column. He surveyed the canyon entrance, the narrow throat that would funnel his men into a killing ground if they were foolish enough to enter. He wasn't foolish. "Apache, we know you're in there. Come out peacefully, and you won't be harmed. You'll be taken to the reservation, where you'll be fed and protected." Maka's voice echoed from the rocks, speaking English for the soldiers' benefit. "You lie. Reservations are death camps. We have done nothing wrong. We ask only to be left in peace. You're illegally occupying federal land. You have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we come in, and whatever happens is on your heads." The captain wheeled his horse and rode back to his men. They dismounted, preparing for a siege, setting up positions, bringing forward what looked like a small field cannon. Eli's blood ran cold. A cannon in this narrow space would be devastating. The ricochets alone would kill everyone. "They have artillery," he whispered to Nalnish. "We can't fight that. Your people need to evacuate now, while we hold them here." "And how long can we hold?" "As long as it takes." She looked at him, and something passed between them. Understanding. Acceptance. The knowledge that they might both die in the next hour, but that some things were worth dying for. "Then we fight. For my daughter. For my people. For the chance that something good survives this world of blood." "For all of that," Eli agreed. But before the hour expired, something unexpected happened. Another rider appeared from the opposite direction, galloping hard. A scout or messenger, his horse lathered with sweat. He reached the captain and spoke urgently, gesturing back the way he'd come. The captain's face went through a series of expressions: frustration, calculation, finally, reluctant acceptance. He called his men together, issued rapid orders. Within 10 minutes, the cavalry was mounting up, preparing to leave. The captain rode close to the canyon entrance one last time. "You have a reprieve. Reports of Apache raiding 20 miles south. My orders are to investigate, but we'll be back. This canyon is marked on every map now.
You can't hide forever." Then they were gone, dust rising behind them as they rode south at speed. The defenders emerged from cover slowly, hardly daring to believe their reprieve. Warriors embraced. Someone laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. Nalnish turned to Eli, her face unreadable. "You fought for us. You stood with us against your own people." "They're not my people anymore. Not if they're trying to destroy families just trying to survive." "Then who are your people?" Eli looked around at the Apache defenders, at Dakota, who had grudgingly accepted him, at Maka, who had given him a chance, at Ayanna, who was running toward them from where she'd been hiding, tears streaming down her face. Finally, he looked at Nalnish, at this woman who had lost everything and still found the strength to hope, to fight, to live. "You are. All of you. If you'll have me." Something shifted in Nalnish's expression. The last wall crumbled. She stepped forward and did something that shocked everyone watching. She took Eli's hand in hers, publicly, deliberately. "Then you are truly Shyla. Truly brother. Truly one of us." That evening, as the village celebrated their survival and mourned how close they'd come to destruction, Maka called Eli and Naalnish before the council. "The captain was right about one thing. This canyon is no longer secret. We cannot stay here. We must find a new home, deeper in the mountains, further from soldiers and settlers." He looked at Eli. "We will need someone who understands how white men think, how they track, how they plan. Someone who can help us stay hidden." "I'll do whatever is needed." Maka nodded, then turned to Naalnish. "And we will need our strongest warrior to lead this exodus. Will you guide us to safety?" "I will, but I will not go alone. I will go with Shyla. Together, we will find a place where our people can live without fear." The council murmured, but no one objected. Naalnish's word carried weight earned through years of service and sacrifice. That night, Eli sat with Ayanna and Naalnish by their fire. The girl had fallen asleep between them, her head on Eli's lap, her feet touching her mother's knee. Above them, stars burned with ancient light, indifferent to human struggles and hopes. "What happens now?" Eli asked quietly. "Now we survive. We find a new home. We rebuild. And maybe, if we are very fortunate, we find something more than just survival." "What more is there?" Naalnish looked at him across the sleeping child, her eyes reflecting firelight and something deeper. "Peace. Family. A reason to believe tomorrow will be better than today." "I'd like that." "So would I." They sat in comfortable silence, three people who had found each other through loss and chance and choice, bound together now by something stronger than blood. Hope. The fragile, precious hope that broken things could be mended, that lost souls could find home, that the world, despite all its cruelty, still had space for redemption. Across the canyon, the first light of dawn began to touch the eastern rim, promising a new day. And for the first time in 3 years, Elijah Blackwood looked toward that light without fear, without grief, without the crushing weight of failure. He looked toward it with hope. And beside him, Naalnish reached across her sleeping daughter and took his hand, not as a gesture of possession, but as a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together, that the family they were building from broken pieces was real and strong and worth fighting for. In the hidden canyon, as the village stirred toward waking, 3 people sat together and watched the sun rise on a future that suddenly seemed possible. The village began preparations for the exodus 3 days after the cavalry's retreat. Every able body worked from dawn to dusk, packing what could be carried, hiding what must be left behind, preparing for a journey that would take them deeper into the wilderness where white men's maps ended, and only memory and courage could guide them. Eli worked alongside Nalnish, their movements synchronized by growing familiarity. They dismantled wiki-ups, sorted supplies, made hard decisions about what was essential and what was merely desired. Survival demanded ruthless efficiency. On the fourth evening, as they rested after another exhausting day, Dakota approached. The warrior's face had lost much of its earlier hostility, replaced by something closer to grudging respect. "Shyla, the council wishes to speak with you." Eli exchanged a glance with Nalnish. She nodded slightly, a gesture of support, and he followed Dakota to the largest wiki-up, where Maka and 5 other elders waited. The old leader gestured for Eli to sit. The elders formed a semicircle, their weathered faces illuminated by firelight, their eyes holding the accumulated wisdom and grief of decades spent watching their world shrink and their people dwindle. "Elijah Stone, who we now call Shyla," Maka began, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony. "You have proven yourself in ways we did not expect. You work hard. You fight beside us. You have earned the trust of our strongest warrior. But there is something we must know before we lead you deeper into our hidden places. Something we must understand about your intentions toward Nalnish." Eli felt his pulse quicken. He had wondered when this conversation would come. "I care for her, deeply, and for Ayana. They've become my family in a way I thought I'd lost forever." One of the elders, a woman with hair like silver spider silk, spoke next. "Caring is not enough. Nalnish has been alone for 5 years since Kale died. She has raised Ayana without a father. Now you appear, and we see how the child looks at you, how Nalnish softens in your presence. We see a family forming. But we must know if this white man understands what it means to join with an Apache woman, what it means to become truly one of our people, not just in name, but in blood and spirit." Eli met each elder's gaze in turn. "I understand that I can never fully become Apache. I wasn't born to your ways. But I can learn them. I can honor them. I can defend them with my life. And I can love Naalnish and Ayana with everything I have left to give. If that's enough, then I'm ready. If it's not, then I'll leave when we reach your new home and never trouble you again." The elders conferred in rapid Apache, their voices low and serious. Finally, Maka raised his hand for silence. "We believe you speak truth. We believe your heart is honest. Therefore, we offer you this. If Naalnish accepts you, if she chooses to join her life with yours, the council will recognize this union. You will be bound to our people not just by choice, but by marriage. Your children will be Apache. Your blood will become part of our blood. Your story will be woven into our story. Do you accept this responsibility?" "I accept it, with everything I am." "Then speak with Nalnish. Let her decide. But know that if she accepts, there is no going back. You will be ours, and we will be yours, until death releases you." When Eli emerged from the council meeting, he found Nalnish waiting outside, her tall frame silhouetted against the last light of sunset. She'd been listening, he realized. Apache hearing was legendary, and the wiki-up walls were thin. "Walk with me," she said. They climbed to their overlook, the rocky outcrop where they'd shared confidences before. The canyon spread below them, shadows deepening as night claimed the world. Above, the first stars appeared, ancient and indifferent to human dramas playing out beneath them.
"Your elders ask me to choose," Nalnish said, without preamble. "They want to know if I will bind my life to yours. And what do you want?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the stone beneath them. "After Kele died, I thought I would never want another man. The pain of losing him nearly destroyed me. When I thought Ayana was dead too, I did not care if I lived or died. I became a weapon, because weapons do not feel. They do not hurt." She turned to face him, and in the dying light, her scar caught the last rays of sun, a silver line dividing her face. "But then you brought my daughter back. Then you stayed when you could have left. Then you fought beside us against your own people. And slowly, without meaning to, you made me remember that I am not just a weapon. I am a woman, a mother, and maybe, if I am brave enough, I could be a wife again." "Nalnish, I'm not asking you to replace Kele. I could never be him. I could never take his place. But maybe I could stand beside you. Build something new. Something that honors what was, while creating what could be. You understand you would be joining us, not the other way around. Your children would be raised Apache. Your old life would be gone forever. My old life died 3 years ago in Pennsylvania. This is my life now. Here, with you, with Ayana, with people who've given me a chance I didn't deserve." Nalnish reached out and touched his face, her calloused palm rough against his bearded cheek. "Then I choose you, Elijah Stone. I choose to build a family from our broken pieces. I choose to believe that the spirits brought us together for a reason, that perhaps two people who have lost everything can create something new together." He covered her hand with his own. "I won't let you down. I swear it on my son's memory. I won't fail you like I failed him." You did not fail him. Disease failed him. War failed him. You only did what you thought was right. Now you have a chance to do right again. Take it. Live it. Be the man you want to be. They kissed then, carefully at first, like two wounded animals learning trust, then with increasing certainty. When they finally pulled apart, both were shaking slightly. "What happens now?" Eli asked. "Now we tell Ayana. Then we tell the village. Then, when we reach our new home, we will join our lives according to Apache tradition. And then we face whatever comes, together." They descended from the overlook, hand in hand, and when they reached the village, Ayana took one look at their joined hands and began jumping with joy. "You are together. You are a family. I knew it. I told everyone." The child's happiness was infectious. Even the most skeptical villagers smiled at her enthusiasm. And when Maka announced that Nalnish and Shyla would marry once they reached their new home, the village celebrated with songs and stories around the fire. The exodus began at dawn. 45 people, moving through canyon country, with everything they owned carried on their backs or pulled on travois behind pack animals. Maka led, using memory and knowledge passed down through generations to navigate terrain that existed on no white man's map. Eli and Nalnish walked together, Ayana between them, the child's hand clasped in each of theirs. Behind them came warriors, women, children, and elders, a fragile chain of humanity seeking sanctuary,
in an increasingly hostile world. The journey took 12 days through country that grew progressively wilder and more remote. They crossed rivers that nearly swept away their supplies, climbed passes so steep that the elderly had to be carried, descended into valleys where ancient rock formations towered like cathedrals built by gods who had long since abandoned the world. On the 7th day, disaster struck. One of the children, a boy of 6, wandered from camp and fell down a steep ravine, breaking his leg badly.
The bone protruded through skin, and infection began almost immediately. The village had no proper medicine. Their healer had died during the raid that scattered them years ago. The boy's mother wept, knowing what a broken leg in the wilderness meant: slow death from infection, or the mercy of a quick end to prevent suffering. Eli knelt beside the boy, examining the wound with hands that remembered field surgery from the war. It was bad, very bad, but not impossible. "I can set the bone, clean the wound, but he'll need to be carried for weeks, and even then he might lose the leg." Nalnish translated rapidly for the mother, who nodded through tears. "Save him, please. Do what you can." What followed was brutal. Eli had to re-break the bone to set it properly, while warriors held the screaming child down. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, the last of his supply, then used heat-sterilized needles and thread to stitch the torn flesh. Finally, he splinted the leg using straight branches and strips of leather, immobilizing it completely. The boy passed out from pain halfway through. His mother prayed in Apache, invoking spirits and ancestors to protect her child. When it was done, Eli sat back, hands shaking and bloody. "That's all I can do. The rest is up to him, and whatever gods are listening." Nalnish cleaned his hands with water from the creek, her touch gentle. "You are a healer. You saved Ayana. Now you save this boy. The village sees this. They understand now why the spirits brought you to us." Over the following days, as they continued their journey with the wounded boy carried on a litter, Eli tended the leg twice daily, checking for infection, checking dressings, monitoring the child's fever. Slowly, impossibly, the boy began to heal. The infection receded. The fever broke. The leg, though forever weaker, would hold his weight again. His mother wept and called Eli a miracle. Maka nodded with satisfaction. Even Dakota, who had been the most suspicious, clasped Eli's shoulder in gratitude. "You have medicine magic, Sheila. This is a gift. Use it well." On the 12th day, they reached their destination, a hidden valley high in the mountains, ringed by peaks so steep that no cavalry could approach undetected. A crystal stream ran through the center, fed by snowmelt from above. Stands of pine provided timber for building. Game trails spoke of abundant hunting. "Here," Maka announced, "here we build anew. Here we make our home until the world changes, or we do." The village erupted into activity. Wiki-ups rose quickly, positioned to take advantage of natural shelter and sight lines. Food caches were established. Hunting grounds were scouted. Within 3 days, the Bear Valley had been transformed into a functioning village, hidden from the world, protected by mountains and determination. On the 4th night in their new home, as the moon rose full and bright over the valley, the village gathered for a ceremony. Eli stood beside Nalnish, both dressed in traditional Apache garments that the women had prepared. Ayana stood between them, her face radiant with joy. Maka performed the rite, speaking Apache words that Eli didn't fully understand, but felt in his bones. The ceremony was simple but profound, sharing food from the same bowl, symbolizing shared life, drinking water from the same vessel,
symbolizing shared spirit. Speaking vows before witnesses, binding two lives into one. When Maka wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders, joining them physically as they had been joined spiritually, Eli felt something fundamental shift inside him. The guilt that had ridden his shoulders for 3 years lifted slightly. Not gone, never gone, but balanced now by purpose and hope and love. "You are joined," Maka pronounced. "Two made one. Family created from loss. May your union strengthen our people and bring healing to wounded hearts." The village erupted in celebration. Songs were sung, stories were told, food was shared, and in the center of it all, Eli held Nalnish and Ayana close, marveling at how life could transform so completely in such a short time. Later, as the celebration wound down and families retreated to their wickiups, Eli sat with his new family around their own fire. Ayana, exhausted from excitement, slept between them, her small hand clutching Eli's fingers even in sleep. "Are you happy?" Nalnish asked quietly. "More than I've been in years. More than I thought I'd ever be again." "Good, because tomorrow, the real work begins. Building a life here, raising a child, surviving winter, teaching each other, learning together. I'm ready for that work. It's the work that matters." She smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "Then we begin tomorrow. But tonight, we celebrate. We have earned this moment of peace." As if summoned by her words, Maka approached their fire, his ancient face thoughtful in the flickering light. "Sheila, there is one more thing. The council has decided that you should be given an Apache name, a true name, not just brother, but something that speaks to who you have become among us. I would be honored. You will be called Tsena. It means one who was lost, but found his way home. One who was dead, but lives again. One who came from darkness, but brought light. This is who you are to us now." Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. A name, a true name. Recognition not just of what he'd done, but of who he was becoming. "Thank you. I will honor this name." After Maka left, Nalnish took Eli's hand. "Tsena, it suits you. You were lost. Now you are found. We are all found, together." The months that followed brought the rhythm of normal life, that precious ordinary routine that feels mundane until it's taken away. Eli, now Tsena, hunted with the men, learned Apache language and customs, and began teaching young warriors the tracking techniques he'd mastered in his solitary years. He and Nalnish built their own wickiup, large enough for 3 and the possibility of more to come. They fell into the pattern of married life, the 1,000 small intimacies that bind two people together. Morning rituals, evening conversations, arguments and reconciliations, the slow building of shared history. Ayana thrived. The trauma of her ordeal faded as security and love surrounded her. She learned from both parents, absorbing Apache traditions from her mother and frontier skills from Eli. She became a bridge between worlds, comfortable in both, limited by neither. One evening, 6 months after they'd reached the hidden valley, Nalnish sat beside Eli and took his hand, placing it on her stomach. "A new life grows here. Our child. A child who will be born free, raised in peace, taught by both our traditions." Eli stared at her, joy and fear warring in his chest. "A child? We're going to have a child." Yes. Are you ready for this? I don't know. I failed my son once. What if I fail again? You did not fail Nathaniel. Life failed him. Circumstances failed him. But you did not fail him, and you will not fail this child. I will not let you. We will raise this child together, and it will know only love and strength and the best of both our peoples. That night, lying together in their wickiup, with Ayanna asleep nearby, Eli thought about the impossible journey that had brought him here. From Pennsylvania to the mountains, from death to life, from solitude to family, from shame to redemption. He would never fully atone for his part in the machinery of conquest. He would never bring back the villages that burned or the families that died. But he could do this. He could love this woman, raise these children. In the hidden canyon, as the village stirred toward waking, 3 people sat together and watched the sun rise on a future that suddenly seemed possible. The air carried the scent of pine and promise, and for the first time since finding Ayanna in the wilderness, Eli felt the tight knot of fear in his chest begin to loosen. They had survived. They had found each other. And tomorrow, they would begin the journey to a new home where perhaps, finally, they could live without looking over their shoulders for the next threat. The peace lasted 8 months. 8 months of building, growing, and learning to live as a true family. 8 months during which Nalnisha's belly swelled with new life, and Ayanna grew taller and more confident. 8 months during which Eli, now called Senna by everyone in the village, became not just accepted but beloved, his medical skills and hunting prowess making him indispensable. Then the world beyond their hidden valley remembered they existed. It began with smoke signals seen from a distant ridge. 3 columns rising into the clear autumn sky, the universal Apache warning of danger approaching. Scouts came racing back to the village with news that turned blood cold. A party of land speculators had been spotted 2 days' ride away, surveying the territory with maps and instruments. They were mapping the mountains, claiming land for future railroad routes or mining operations. Behind them would come settlers. Behind settlers would come soldiers to protect them. Behind soldiers would come the inevitable destruction of everything the Apache had built. But there was more, and it was worse. The lead surveyor was a man named Samuel Graves, a lawyer from Santa Fe with a reputation for using fraudulent land grants to steal territory from indigenous peoples. He'd already displaced 3 tribes using forged documents and corrupt officials. Now he'd set his sights on the mountain territory that included the hidden valley. The council convened immediately. Maka's face showed every one of his 67 years as he listened to the scouts' reports. If they find us, they will claim this land. They will produce papers that say it belongs to them, papers that no Apache testimony can counter in white man's courts. We will be driven out again, or worse. Takota's voice rang with barely controlled fury. Then we kill them before they find us. Ambush them in the canyons. Leave no witnesses. No one will know what happened to them. But Maka shook his head. If they disappear, more will come searching. The army will come. We will be hunted like animals. No, we need another way. All eyes turned to Eli, the white man who understood how his people thought, how they schemed, how their system of laws and papers worked. There might be a way, Eli said slowly, an idea forming. If Graves is using forged documents, there will be records in Santa Fe that prove it. land office registries, signatures that don't match, dates that contradict official records. I saw it during my time in Pennsylvania. Corrupt officials make mistakes. They get greedy and careless. "And how does this help us?" Dakota demanded. "We cannot go to white man's courts. They do not recognize Apache rights." "No, but I can go to Santa Fe. I can investigate, find proof of the forgery, expose Graves before he can claim this land. It's a long shot, but it's better than fighting a war we can't win." Nalnish stood abruptly, her hand protective over her swollen belly. "No, I will not lose you. Not now. Not when our child is almost here." Eli moved to her side, taking her hand gently. "And I will not lose this family. Not after finding you. But if I don't go, if I don't try, we lose everything anyway. Graves will take this valley. The army will come. Our child will be born into exile again. I can't let that happen." The argument raged for hours. Nalnish refused to accept the danger. Eli insisted there was no other choice. Finally, Maka raised his hand for silence. "Naalnish will go with him." Everyone started speaking at once. Impossible. She was with child. Too dangerous. But Maka's voice cut through the chaos. "She will go because she speaks English well, because she knows white towns from trading days, because no one will expect a pregnant Apache woman to be gathering evidence of fraud, and because if Tsena is captured, she can escape and bring word back to us. Two have a better chance than one." Naalnish and Eli exchanged a long look. Neither liked it. Both understood the necessity. "We leave at dawn," Eli said quietly. The journey to Santa Fe took 4 days of hard riding. Naalnish couldn't move as quickly as usual, the pregnancy slowing her, but she refused to complain. They traveled by night when possible, avoiding settlements and trails where they might be seen. Eli watched her with growing concern and admiration. She rode with the same fierce determination that had allowed her to survive everything life had thrown at her. But he could see the toll it took, the way she held her belly protectively, the grimace of pain she tried to hide when the baby kicked particularly hard. On the 3rd night, camped in a hidden arroyo, she finally admitted her fear. "What if the baby comes early? What if something goes wrong out here with no healer, no medicine?" Eli held her close, feeling their child moving between them. "Then we handle it together. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived losing your husband. You survived losing Ayana. You survived 2 years of grief that would have destroyed anyone else. You can survive this. But what if I can't? What if I lose you both?" "You won't. I promise you won't." It was a promise he had no right to make, but sometimes love demands promises that reason cannot guarantee. They reached Santa Fe on the evening of the 4th day. The town had grown since Eli's last visit during his search for Ayana's people. More buildings, more people, more of the relentless expansion that was swallowing the frontier. Naalnish hid her Apache features beneath a wide-brimmed hat and long coat. In the dying light, she could pass for Mexican or mixed blood, common enough in Santa Fe to not draw immediate attention. But they had to move quickly. Every moment in town increased the risk of exposure. Eli headed straight for the Territorial Land Office, a low adobe building near the plaza. He waited until the clerk was distracted, then slipped into the records room, where dusty ledgers contained the history of every land claim filed in the territory. He worked fast, fingers flying through pages, searching for any mention of the mountain range where their valley lay hidden. There, 3 claims filed in the past year, all signed by the same territorial governor, all bearing official seals, But something was wrong. The dates didn't align. One claim was dated 6 months before the governor had taken office. Another bore a signature that didn't match other documents Eli found from the same official. He carefully made notes, memorizing details, wishing he could take the documents, but knowing that would alert Graves immediately. When he emerged, Nalnish was waiting in the shadows, her face tense. "Trouble. I saw Graves. He's staying at the hotel across the plaza, and he's not alone. 6 men with him. Gunmen." Eli's mind raced. 6 against 2, with Nalnish pregnant. Not odds he liked. "We need more evidence, and we need to get it to someone who can use it. An honest official. A judge who can't be bought." "Does such a man exist?" "I heard of one. Judge Marcus Walsh, appointed by Washington, not local politics. Has a reputation for fairness. If we can get proof to him before Graves realizes we're here, we might have a chance." They spent the night in a cheap boarding house on the edge of town, Nalnish sleeping fitfully, Eli standing watch at the window. When dawn broke, he made his way to the courthouse. Judge Walsh was exactly as described. 60 years old, iron-gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as Eli laid out the case, showed him the discrepancies in dates and signatures, explained how Graves was using forged documents to steal land. "You have a good eye, Mr. Stone. These documents are indeed fraudulent. But you understand that bringing charges against Mr. Graves will require testimony, witnesses, evidence presented in open court. Are you prepared for that?" "I am, but we don't have much time. Graves is planning to file final claims within days. Once that's done, even fraudulent documents become hard to challenge." Walsh nodded slowly. "Give me 24 hours. I'll issue a temporary restraining order preventing any new land claims in that territory until an investigation is complete. But, Mr. Stone, you've made a dangerous enemy. Graves has powerful friends, men who profit from his schemes. They won't let this go quietly." Eli left the courthouse with the first spark of hope he'd felt since this nightmare began. But the hope died when he reached the boarding house. It was surrounded. 6 men, guns drawn, waiting. And in the center, Samuel Graves himself. 48 years old, dressed in an expensive suit, looking more like a banker than a thief. Eli's hand moved toward his gun, but a voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't. Not unless you want your Apache wife to die." 2 men emerged from the boarding house, dragging Nalnish between them. Her hat had been lost in the struggle. Her long black hair and distinctive features left no doubt what she was: an Apache in Santa Fe. A death sentence without protection. Graves smiled, and it was the smile of a snake who'd cornered his prey. "Mr. Stone, or should I say, Elijah Blackwood? Yes, I know who you are. A deserter from the army, a man living with savages. Did you think you could challenge me? Me? I own this town. I own the officials. I own the law." "Not Judge Walsh. He's already issued an order stopping your land grab." Graves' smile never wavered. "Judge Walsh can issue all the orders he wants. By tomorrow, he'll be recalled to Washington on charges of corruption that I will manufacture. By next week, a new judge appointed by my friends will approve my claims, and you and your savage wife will be dead in an unmarked grave." He gestured to his men. "Take them to the warehouse. We'll deal with them after dark. Quietly. No witnesses." They were bound and thrown into the back of a wagon, driven through town as the sun climbed higher. Nalnish was trying not to show pain, but Eli could see the way she held her belly, the sheen of sweat on her face. "The baby?" he whispered. "Coming soon. Maybe today. We need to get free." The warehouse was on the edge of town, a large structure used for storing goods before shipment. Dark, isolated, perfect for murder. They were dragged inside and tied to support posts. Graves' men left to get supplies, leaving 2 guards watching. Graves himself departed with a final warning. "When I return tonight, you'll tell me everything about the Apache village. Location, numbers, defenses. And then I'll sell that information to the army for a generous bounty, after which you both die. Think about that while you wait." The door slammed. Darkness swallowed them except for thin light through gaps in the walls. Nalnish made a sound that wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a scream. Eli's blood went cold. "The baby?" "Coming. Now. We're out of time." One of the guards heard and laughed. "Even better. They'll both die here. Save us some work." Rage like nothing Eli had felt since the war flooded through him. He'd survived Gettysburg. He'd survived 3 years alone in the mountains. He'd survived everything life had thrown at him. He would not let his wife and unborn child die in this filthy warehouse. The ropes binding him were thick, but not perfectly tied. The guards, overconfident, had been sloppy. Eli worked his wrists, ignoring the pain as hemp cut into skin. Blood made the ropes slippery, an advantage if he could use it. Across from him, Nalnish panted through contractions, trying to stay quiet, trying not to alert the guards to how far along the labor had progressed. "Hold on," Eli whispered. "Just hold on." It took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours, but finally his hands slipped free. He froze, listening. The guards were arguing about cards, their attention elsewhere. Eli moved like smoke. Years of tracking game in silence had taught him how to step without sound. He reached the first guard and used a technique learned in hand-to-hand combat training. Arm around throat. Squeeze. The man struggled for 5 seconds, then went limp. The second guard turned, saw what was happening, reached for his gun. But Eli was faster. A kick to the knee, a punch to the throat. The guard went down choking, and Eli took his revolver, using the butt to knock him unconscious. He untied Nalnish with shaking hands. "Can you ride?" "I have to. But Eli, the baby is coming now, within the hour. We can't outrun this." "Then we don't run. We end this." He helped her to a corner where she could brace herself, then took position by the door. When Graves returned with his men, they'd walk into an ambush. 6 against 1, but Eli had surprise and desperation on his side. The wait was agony. Nalnish breathed through contractions, biting down on leather to stay quiet. Eli stood ready. 2 revolvers now, taken from the unconscious guards. Then voices outside. The door opening. Men silhouetted against evening light. Eli fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The first 2 shots took down the lead gunman. The third shattered a lantern, plunging everything into darkness and confusion. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, fired blindly, hit each other in the darkness. Eli moved between support posts, using the warehouse's layout to his advantage, picking targets by muzzle flash. When the shooting stopped, 4 of Graves' men lay dead or wounded. The other 2 had fled. And Graves himself cowered behind a crate, his expensive suit covered in dust and terror written across his face. Eli stood over him, gun pointed at his head. "You're done. Judge Walsh has your documents. I have witnesses who'll testify about this attack. You're going to prison for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are.
Graves laughed, a desperate sound. You think this ends with me? I'm just one man. There are hundreds more like me. The frontier is being settled. The Apache are finished. You can't stop progress. Maybe not, but I can stop you. A sound from the corner made both men turn. Nalnish, her face pale with pain and effort, had dragged herself upright. The baby. Now. Everything else ceased to matter. Eli holstered the gun, tied Graves to a post, and moved to his wife's side. What followed was primal and terrifying and beautiful. Nalnish gripped his hands with crushing force, bore down with the strength of a warrior facing her greatest battle. And Eli, who had delivered foals and calves, but never a human child, did his best to guide their baby into the world. When the infant's first cry split the air, Eli wept. A son. They had a son. He cleaned the baby with strips torn from his shirt, cut the cord with a knife heated in flame, and placed the squirming bundle on Nalnish's chest. She looked up at him, exhausted and radiant, tears streaming down her face. We did it. We survived. You survived. You're the strongest person I've ever known. The door burst open. Judge Walsh entered with armed deputies, drawn by the sound of gunfire. He took in the scene with one comprehensive glance. Dead gunman, tied prisoner, woman with newborn, man with gun standing guard. Mr. Stone, I see you've been busy. Judge, Samuel Graves attempted to murder us to prevent testimony about his land fraud. I acted in self-defense. These men can confirm it. The two surviving gunmen, both wounded, nodded frantically. They'd sing any tune to avoid hanging. Walsh approached Graves, who slumped in his bonds, defeat written across his features. Mr. Graves, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. You'll stand trial in federal court, not territorial. Your friends can't save you there. Then Walsh turned to Nalnish and the baby. Ma'am, that child needs a doctor, and you need rest. I'll arrange for safe transport back to wherever you call home. Eli helped Nalnish to her feet, supporting her as she cradled their son. Home. Yes, we need to go home. The journey back took twice as long, traveling slowly to protect mother and child. But they made it. And when they rode into the hidden valley a week later, the village erupted in celebration. Maka blessed the child in Apache tradition, naming him Kele Nathaniel, Sparrowhawk, after Nalnish's first husband, Nathaniel, after Eli's lost son. A bridge between two worlds, a promise that love could survive in spite of hatred. That night, as they lay in their wickiup with their son sleeping between them and Ayana curled up nearby, Nalnish spoke softly. We have land. We have proof Graves is gone. Judge Walsh promised to establish this valley as protected territory. We are safe. For now, until the next threat. Then we face it together, as we faced this one, as we will face everything that comes. Eli looked at his family, his wife, warrior and mother, his daughter, bridge between worlds, his son, hope for the future. And he understood something fundamental. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And he would walk that journey every day of his life, trying to be worthy of the family that had given him a second chance. Outside, the wind whispered through pines. Stars burned in the infinite sky. And in the hidden valley, a family born from loss and built on hope
slept peacefully, protected by mountains and by love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The frontier would continue to close. The Apache would continue to fight for survival. But tonight, in this moment, they had won. And sometimes, one victory is enough to sustain you through a lifetime of struggle. Sometimes, the broken pieces fit together to create something stronger than what existed before. Sometimes, a man running from his past finds redemption by protecting the future. And sometimes, just sometimes, love is enough. The colors of the present world bled back slowly, sepia tones giving way to the vibrant autumn of 1902. Old Eli blinked, returning from memory to the porch where he sat with his grandson Thomas beside him. The young man's eyes were wide, glistening with emotion, barely held in check. "That's incredible, grandfather. You lived through all that? You really did all those things?" Old Eli's weathered hand reached for the cold coffee cup, fingers trembling slightly with age rather than fear now. He took a sip despite the bitter chill, using the moment to gather himself after the journey through decades past. Every word true, though memory has a way of polishing rough edges and darkening shadows. The truth is never as clean as stories make it sound. There was more blood, more fear, more nights when I thought we wouldn't survive until morning. Thomas leaned forward, hungry for more. "What happened after? After you defeated Graves? Did the valley stay safe?" "For a time. Judge Walsh was true to his word. He established the valley as protected Apache territory, one of the few pieces of land that remained in indigenous hands as the frontier closed around us. We lived there for 20 years, 20 good years, despite everything." Old Eli's eyes grew distant again, but this time he remained in the present, speaking rather than showing. "Your father was born in that valley? Kale Nathaniel. We called him Nate mostly, though Nal Nish used his Apache name when she wanted him to listen." A soft chuckle escaped him. "He grew strong and tall, learned to hunt from his mother and track from me, spoke both Apache and English perfectly, moved between both worlds with an ease I never quite managed." "And Ayana? What happened to her?" "Ayana," old Eli's voice carried deep affection. "She grew into a woman much like her mother, strong, fierce, protective of her people. She married a warrior named Yato when she was 17. They had 3 children of their own. She leads the village now, after Nalnish passed and Maka finally joined his ancestors. She's 40 now, can you believe that? Still sharp as a knife, still commanding respect from everyone who knows her." Thomas did the mathematics quickly in his head. 60. But that would mean she'd remember everything clearly. I could meet her? Meet the child you saved? You could, and you will if you want. The valley is still there, though fewer people live in it now. Many have moved to reservations or tried to blend into white society. But a core remains, keeping the traditions, keeping the language. Ayana made me promise before Nalnish died that we'd always maintain ties between our 2 worlds. That the family we built wouldn't fracture just because we looked different or spoke different languages. Old Eli stood slowly, joints protesting the movement, and walked to the doorway. He gestured toward the distant mountains, purple shadows against the evening sky. "Your father visited them every summer until he married your mother. Even after, until work kept him too busy. But the connection remains. It's in your blood, Thomas. Apache blood, mixed with Pennsylvania farm stock. Mountain man stubbornness, mixed with warrior courage. That's your inheritance. That's who you are. The young man joined his grandfather at the door, following his gaze toward those distant peaks. "Tell me about grandmother, about how she died." Old Eli was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of grief that time had softened but never quite erased. "Pneumonia, 10 years ago this winter. It came on fast, even though she was strong as iron right up until the end. She was only 52, far too young, but the winter was brutal and medicine scarce. I tried everything, every remedy I knew, every prayer to every god either of us had ever believed in. But sometimes, trying isn't enough." He paused, and Thomas saw tears on the weathered cheeks. "She died in our bed, in the wickiup we'd shared for 30 years. Ayanna was there. Nate was there. I held her hand while she took her last breath. Her final words were in Apache, a prayer, or maybe a promise. I never quite knew which, but her eyes were at peace. After all the pain she'd survived, all the loss, all the fighting, she went peacefully. That's something, at least. I'm sorry, grandfather. I wish I could have met her." "I wish that too. She would have loved you. You have her eyes, you know. That same determination. That same refusal to quit when things get hard." Thomas absorbed this in silence, then asked the question that had been building throughout the story. "Do you regret it? Leaving your old life behind? Becoming Apache? Living so far from civilization?" Old Eli turned to face his grandson directly, and his eyes burned with an intensity that belied his years. "Regret? Boy, those 32 years with Naalnish and our family were the only years of my life that mattered. Before her, I was just existing, surviving, running from ghosts I couldn't escape. She gave me purpose. She gave me redemption. She gave me a reason to be better than I was." He gripped Thomas's shoulder with surprising strength. "Never regret choosing love over convention. Never regret choosing family over comfort. Never regret doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. Those are the only choices worth making in this life." They stood together in companionable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that reminded old Eli of countless sunsets watched from a rocky overlook with a warrior woman beside him. Finally, Thomas spoke again. "There's something I need to tell you. Part of why I came here." Old Eli raised an eyebrow, waiting. "The government is planning to open more Indian territory to white settlement. There's talk of dissolving the protected status of several areas, including the valley. They say it's for progress, for development. 68 years he'd walked this earth, and still the same patterns repeated. Still the hunger for land trumped promises. Still indigenous peoples were pushed further and further into corners until there was nowhere left to go." "When?" "Next spring, if the legislation passes. There's opposition, but with tensions with Spain and all the talk of empire, nobody much cares about a few dozen Apache living in a mountain valley." Old Eli was quiet for 3 breaths. Then he straightened, and suddenly he didn't look like an old man anymore. He looked like the warrior he'd become 3 decades ago. "Then we fight. Not with guns, that time is past, but with lawyers and testimony and every legal maneuver we can muster. Judge Walsh is dead, but he had protégés, people who still believe in honoring treaties. We find them. We make them listen." "I was hoping you'd say that. Because I went to law school for a reason, grandfather. I studied everything I could about Indian rights, land claims, treaty law. I'm not as skilled as I need to be, not yet, but I'm learning, and I want to help. I want to protect the valley where you found your life." Old Eli pulled his grandson into an embrace, and his voice was rough with emotion. Your grandmother would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. This is what family does. This is what it means to honor the sacrifices of those who came before. We don't let their struggles be for nothing. They broke apart, and Thomas saw determination burning in those ancient eyes. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll write letters tonight to everyone I know who might help. You'll deliver them and start building our case. We have 6 months before spring. 6 months to save a valley and the people living in it. As darkness fell, they moved inside the cabin. Old Eli lit a lamp and began pulling out boxes of papers from a trunk that hadn't been opened in years. Documents from Judge Walsh, letters from territorial officials, a detailed map of the valley showing every spring, every shelter, every sacred site. These might help. Proof that the protection was granted legally. Proof that the valley was set aside specifically for Apache use. It's not much, but it's a start. Thomas pored over the documents with the focused intensity of a young lawyer seeing his first real case. This is good. Better than good. These documents were filed at the federal level, not just territorial. That means they carry more weight. If we can prove the protection is still legally valid, we might be able to block the new settlement legislation. They worked late into the night, grandfather and grandson, bridging generations through shared purpose. Outside, the wind carried whispers of the past and promises for the future. As midnight approached, Thomas finally asked the question that had haunted him since the story began. Do you think you redeemed yourself? Do you think you balanced the scales for what you did during the war? Old Eli set down his pen and was quiet for a long time. Redemption isn't a transaction, boy. It's not a scale you balance and then you're done. It's a way of living. Every day I woke up next to Nalnish, I tried to be worthy of her. Every time I taught a young warrior to track, or delivered a baby, or helped settle a dispute, I was trying to add something good to a world I'd helped make worse. He looked at the old Sharps rifle on the wall, the weapon that had accompanied him through so many trials. Did I succeed? I don't know. The people I killed during the war are still dead. The villages that burned are still ashes. But I saved lives too. I built things. I raised good children who are raising good children. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Thomas said firmly. You chose to change. That's more than most men ever do. Old Eli smiled, a genuine expression that lit his weathered face. Maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky enough to find people willing to give me a chance I didn't deserve. Either way, I'm grateful for every moment I had with them. He stood and stretched, feeling every one of his 68 years. Get some sleep. We have a long fight ahead of us. But Thomas, remember this. The fight is worth it. Protecting that valley, protecting those people, honoring the woman who saved my life by letting me save hers. That's everything that matters. Thomas gathered the documents carefully, treating them with the reverence they deserved. I'll protect it, grandfather. I promise. For grandmother, for Ayana, for all of them. Good boy. You're more like your father than you know, and he was the best of both his parents. As Thomas headed to the guest room, old Eli remained at the table, looking at a small leather pouch he'd kept hidden in the trunk beneath the documents. He opened it carefully and pulled out a single item. A beaded bracelet, Apache design, the colors faded, but the craftsmanship still evident. Nalnish had made it for him during their first winter together. He'd worn it every day until her death, when he'd finally removed it and stored it away because seeing it was too painful. Now he slipped it back onto his wrist where it belonged. "We're not done fighting yet, my love," he whispered to the empty room. "Our grandson is going to help me protect your home,
just like you would have wanted." In the silence, he could almost hear her voice, strong and certain, the way she'd sounded when they faced impossible odds together. "Then fight well, Senna. Fight with honor. Fight for family." He smiled through tears and whispered back into the darkness, "Always, until my last breath." The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and patient, waiting for dawn, waiting for the next chapter of a story that spanned generations and refused to end as long as someone remembered and someone cared. Old Eli extinguished the lamp and made his way to his own bed, the bracelet warm against his wrist. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, political maneuvering, powerful men trying to erase the promises made to powerless people. But tonight, he was an old man remembering a warrior woman and the life they'd built from nothing but hope and stubborn determination. Tonight, he was Senna of the Apache, and his family needed him one more time. He would not fail them. He would fight until the valley was safe, until the promises were honored, until the legacy he and Nalnish had built together was secure for the generations to come. This was his final mission, his last stand, the ultimate proof that redemption wasn't a moment, but a lifetime of moments, strung together by choice after choice, to be better, to do better, to protect what matters. And as sleep finally claimed him, old Eli Blackwood, once a soldier, once a hermit, once a man drowning in grief, dreamed of a hidden valley where his wife waited by a fire. Their children played in safety, and the mountains stood guard over a family that had earned the right to exist. He dreamed of home, and in the morning he would fight to preserve it. Because that's what family does. That's what love demands. That's what redemption looks like in the harsh and beautiful reality of a life fully lived. The fight lasted through winter and into spring. Thomas traveled to Washington, armed with his grandfather's documents and his own legal training. Old Eli wrote letters, gave testimony, and rallied every connection Judge Walsh had left behind. The case went before federal court in March of 1903. On a Thursday morning, the verdict came down. The Apache Valley would remain protected. The land grants were fraudulent. The promises made 30 years ago would be honored. Old Eli received the news by telegram. He sat on his porch, the paper trembling in his weathered hands, and wept. Not from sadness, but from the profound relief that comes when a life's work is finally complete. 3 weeks later, on a morning so clear the mountains seemed close enough to touch, Elijah Blackwood passed peacefully in his sleep. The beaded bracelet Nalnish had made for him still circled his wrist. His last words, spoken to Thomas the night before, were simple. "Tell Ayanna we kept our promise. Tell her the valley is safe." At his funeral, held in the hidden valley he had fought so hard to protect, Ayanna stood before the gathered people, both Apache and white. She was 40 years old now, a leader in her own right, and when she spoke, her voice carried the strength of both her parents. This man was not born Apache, but he died Apache. He gave us back our daughter. He gave us our lives. He gave us a future. His name was Senna, and his story will be told as long as mountains stand and rivers flow. Thomas visited the valley every summer after that, bringing his own children to learn the language and the ways of their grandmother's people. The bracelet, carefully preserved, was given to his eldest son with instructions to pass it down through generations. And in that hidden valley, where Nalnish had once hunted and Eli had found redemption,
life continued. Not untouched by the changing world, but protected by the sacrifice of two people who proved that love could bridge any divide, that broken men could heal, and that family was stronger than blood.
The story of the White Mountain Man and the Apache warrior became legend, told around fires on cold nights, a reminder that redemption is real, that change is possible, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with guns, but with stubborn hope and unconditional love.
And that, in the end, is always enough.